All right, hi. This is my country video presentation. I believe this is the third one. So yeah. So just to start, why did 7-Eleven fail in Indonesia? I got a couple things. The first one being that they discussed kind of while they were still open, where that people weren't necessarily spending money. They would kind of drop by, buy a drink, and then just wait outside with all their friends because they kind of had more like a hangout spot going in Indonesia. So people would buy only like one thing, and it wasn't necessarily making 7-Eleven a lot of money. Another thing is competition just as a whole. There's a bunch of existing and new competition when 7-Eleven was in the market. I believe they mentioned Family Mart, Alpha Mart, and Indomaret, and all those are Indonesian-based stores. So it kind of made it hard for 7-Eleven to compete with them a little bit. The next one being is the market did become a little saturated. There was a huge growth of convenience stores. It started at just 12K, went all the way up to 40K in 9 years, and that's a huge jump, and that can make the market a little saturated. Next one is 7-Eleven didn't necessarily have enough locations just in general. When you look at some of their other competitors, they were holding 30% of the market, 40% of the market, and 7-Eleven was holding 0.07. So that kind of, just makes it hard to succeed in general. Next one being is 7-Eleven definitely faced a lot of regulatory issues. The first one being that after they started opening up stores, they banned alcohol in those kind of mini-mart stores, and that took a huge hit and caused 7-Eleven to kind of lose some money. And another one is that due to the fact that they are a foreign brand, there was a couple more regulations and stuff that, restrictions that 7-Eleven faced if they wanted to expand, where if you were a local company, you did not. So that's why some of the, Family Mart and stuff like that were able to expand so much, but 7-Eleven wasn't. Next one being is the actual competition themselves had a wider range of products just compared to 7-Eleven, which, makes them more appealing. And then geographically, 7-Eleven also was very limited, as I kind of talked about earlier. They were only in Jakarta and, some of the neighboring cities. But compared to the other companies who were spread out, along the whole, around the whole country, it was a big deal. And finally, they just mentioned Indonesia kind of had an economic slowdown there. Just economically, they kind of lost a little bit of buying power, which isn't good for, 7-Eleven, and it inevitably hurt their company. All right, so now for select one country that I think 7-Eleven would be good in. I ended up going with Chile, and just a couple of reasons why. It is the sixth most populous South American country, has a population of 19 million, I believe, so that's pretty good. And 88 to 90% of the population lives in cities already, which is good for 7-Eleven because that's where they want to place their stores. So that's definitely an appealing factor of it. And they also have a very fast-growing middle class, which is always good for any company. Another thing is they're the number one in Latin America for ease of doing business, and 7-Eleven doesn't have any stores in South America, Latin America, or they have a couple in Latin America, but none in South America. So going into this market, you want to go into an easy country to go into. So Chile is good for that. They also have the highest GDP percentile in South America, which is obviously, more money, more business. So always good. Another thing is they actually do have a growing culture of, these kind of mini market shops, which, is always good and good for 7-Eleven to enter. But as of this moment, they don't necessarily have a big dog dominating the market in Chile. They have a couple small shops here and there, but no one's necessarily dominating the market, which is good news for 7-Eleven. And also, it's just already a goal country for 7-Eleven. I believe, I don't know who put it out, but they put out a bunch of stuff talking about a bunch of countries they want to enter to by 2030. And Chile was one of them. So I feel like that's, it aligns with what they want to do, and I think that's good. All right. Oh, what are they famous for? Chile's famous for a couple things. The most obvious one being Easter Island. All those heads. Pretty cool stuff. And they're also they're also home for Sauvignon Blanc, which is my girlfriend's mom's favorite wine. So really cool stuff going on in Chile. One cultural quirk that they have is their PDA. It's very prominent. People aren't afraid to just make out with their significant other. Even greeting, everyone, you either do the cheek kiss or you at least get a hug, but PDA is very high there, and it's very prominent just as a whole. All right. And then which entry strategy? So I decided to go with franchising for this. And the reason for that is, one, this is kind of what 7-Eleven already does when they're, for their previous global expansions. They did it in Thailand, Australia, Philippines, and all of Scandinavia. And, it worked there, so I have a feeling it'll work in South America too. And, just because of this, that's always good. Another reason for franchising, it's an unfamiliar market to begin with. Like I said earlier, they have no stores in South America, so this kind of limits the risk and limits the just how much money you have to necessarily put into something like this. And with franchises, obviously, they get to deal with all of the hard stuff, like the real estate, staffing, and just having local knowledge as a whole, which if we did something like a greenfield investment would be a lot harder to do and a lot more research for us to do. Another reason for franchising, faster market entry. Like I said, you don't have to build things up. You just kind of tell someone hey, you want to open this? Be my guest, which is always good. And it kind of requires minimal modification just as a whole. But there is a couple downsides. The main one that I kind of found was the lack of quality control. With 7-Eleven and with franchising, you can put out rules, you can put out regulations for what your franchisees have to follow, but you're nowhere near Chile, so if they're not following it, you don't necessarily realize. So you'd have to fly someone out. You could do some checks here and there, but it's just not necessarily, you can't always focus on the quality. It kind of has to come and go, but yeah. Now looking at Chile's infrastructure, the World Bank LPI ranks them as 3 out of 5, which is 61st out of 139 countries. And more specifically, they ranked 3 on customs, 2.8 on infrastructure, 3 on tracking and tracing, and 3.2 on timelessness, and 3.1 on competence. All these are okay. They're not like fantastic out of this world, but it's actually the best logistic country in South America. So it's a new market that we want to enter, so that's always good. Looking at the roads, they have a very good highway system, no problems there, very good toll roads that go throughout the country, and they have a modern ring road system, which is very good for distribution. Looking at the rails now, they have rails here and there connecting key commercial areas. Nothing too special about them, but they exist. And they also they have a very modern metro in Santiago, which is the capital. So that's always good, especially for foot traffic and stuff like that. Looking at airs, Santiago's airport is actually one of the busiest in South America, which is good for, importing goods quickly and just getting tourists in the country in general, which I feel like will be something that are both positive for 7-Eleven. Internet, Chile actually has the highest internet usage rate or availability rate in South America. Approximately 90% of the country has internet access as of 2024. They also have strong 4G coverage kind of around the country, and in some of the main cities there is 5G here and there, but yeah, it's a pretty internet heavy country. Now just look at the effects of infrastructure and how that'll cause 7-Eleven to thrive. So the highway, these roads, as I said, are consistent, they're good, so it's going to be very reliable for supply. And deliveries and stuff like that, supply chain stuff, all that delivery stuff is going to be very reliable due to the highway system. The metro system in Santiago, which is where I would recommend the 7-Eleven to start opening up. It's a similar idea to an extent of kind of like the Japanese Tokyo system. And as we've seen, 7-Eleven has succeeded in there, so that'll be good. And just by having that metro, you have more people passing through stations, walking around, walking through the city, and these convenience stores are going to get, more foot traffic just in general, as I said. Another one is the high internet usage. This is very appealing for 7-Eleven, as they've kind of moved into this delivery app kind of world, and with most of the country having internet, these delivery apps will definitely get a lot of use. It's also good. They have mobile loyalty apps, which is something they focus on, and it won't be an issue with the high internet rate. And then also just mobile ordering and like mobile tap to pay are both something that are good for, are pros for 7-Eleven. And yeah. Some challenges, or credit card, digital pay. Sorry, forgot to talk about that. It's also very high there, so you don't need to rely on cash necessarily if you're 7-Eleven, and just by doing that, you get everything just moves kind of quicker. You don't have some old man counting cash in front of you, which is always a pro and just good for getting people in and out of the store and keeping things kind of simple. By not having someone count cash like that, you can just rely on the computer. Some challenges, in case you weren't aware, it's a very long country, and this makes it hard for this. There's obviously major cities where this infrastructure is strong, but it's a long country, so not everywhere is going to have these things, and it's going to slow down kind of outside of those main cities, which just isn't a positive for 7-Eleven, but I don't see them necessarily opening stores outside of the capital, but still something to look at. They also did have a weak LPI score when you look at like the whole world. When you compare it to somewhere like Japan, or even like a possible market like England or Germany, they don't have a high LPI score, which is it's good for South America, but not good for the rest of the world. So now, why I think 7-Eleven will succeed. They're the most economically stable country in South America. Obviously, big pro. They're very stable. They have they're very affluent as well. I believe they might also be the most affluent country in South America, which is good for that, which means they have, more spending power, more ability to kind of spend on things that, you pay a little bit more for convenience, which is what 7-Eleven has to offer, and they kind of have the money to do that. So that's definitely a big factor that'll help 7-Eleven succeed. Another one is Chili's been known to be kind of accepting and trusting of international brands. Some American brands like Walmart, Hershey's, Gap, they've all entered Chile and have done pretty well for themselves. So you don't have to worry about them kind of shunning these international brands, which is always good. And then they also have a willingness to pay for, quality and convenience, which is what 7-Eleven has to offer. You pay that extra for convenience, it's always good. They're a very digital country, as I stated earlier, so it's good for app-based loyalty and online deliveries. These are both two things that 7-Eleven likes to focus on, and due to the high internet, they'll be able to focus on that very strongly. Another one is Santiago, very dense urban population. This is, like I said, where I would recommend 7-Eleven opening up some stores. Very dense urban population. I believe like 40% or something of the population lives in the city, which is always good. And then they have that metro underground, which is going to bring people from, neighboring, not as big cities or towns, bring them into the city and kind of allow them to walk around and, walk into these convenience stores, which is what 7-Eleven wants, more foot traffic. Final reason they succeed, like I said earlier, again, they don't have any like big competitors going on in the Chilean market. There's little stuff here and there. There's mom and pop kind of shops, but none of them really have like the same vision and same focus that 7-Eleven does, which is why I think it'll be a very strong, which I think it'll be very successful in Chile, especially Santiago. Yeah, thank you.